Hello and welcome to Looking at Social Justice. I'm Jim Grant, and it's my privilege today to be debuting a brand new effort of the Diocese of Fresno to introduce to any listeners and any viewers who receive podcasts or YouTube videos a chance to see some themes of social justice here in the San Joaquin Valley in the Diocese of Fresno. It's my privilege to have worked at KNXT-TV for many years, but now we're trying something a little new with podcasts. These programs that you're seeing will be available to you at our KNXT.TV website as a YouTube video, but also on all the ways that people ever hear a podcast. We're so glad to be beginning this series with a guest who is the perfect first guest on our series, Radley Reep. Radley Reep is a member of the League of Women Voters, and I met Radley over the project of the General Plan of Fresno County. I wonder if we could begin, Radley, by you telling us something about what is a general plan anyways, and your involvement in it, and the League and what you do in that sense.
I'd be happy to. A general plan is a long-range planning document, sort of a master development plan for an entire county or city. So every city and every county in California has one. They're pretty much left up to the counties and cities what to put in them. The state does not really demand what goes in them, but there's sort of an understanding that certain things have to be covered, like housing, transportation, conservation of resources, and that sort of thing. So it's filled with all kinds of policies that indicate where development can occur and how it should be done.
And this would be something that is how long ranged? How far out does a general plan mean to project?
It's generally understood in California that they range from about 15 to 25 years.
Wow.
Now, Fresno County's is a 20-year plan, basically. So it was adopted in 2000, which means in 2020, that is the time one needs to think about revising it again.
So we're at that point.
We are. It's called the General Plan Horizon, if I use that word. That's as far as they could plan to the future with any kind of accuracy. So the horizon is the year 2020 for this particular plan.
Now, the reason you're here is you're a very active member of the League of Women Voters, whom I hear have been really engaged for almost the whole run of that plan that we're living with right now, those 18 first years of this plan. Tell us about that connection with the League of Women Voters, you're part of it, and what they've done, what you've done.
Surely. I really enjoy working with the League of Women Voters of Fresno. For one thing, they have such a broad interest range. They're interested primarily in civic engagement, in all aspects of civic engagement. So the local league right here has an interest in affordable housing, education for preschool, all kinds of things. And so it's fun to actually work with the people in the league because they're so knowledgeable about so many things in the county. And by the way, I am a member, I am male, but there's about 20% of us actually now in the league are men, which is great.
Now tell us about the efforts of the league over this, these first 18 years of this plan.
Sure, actually it goes back before that. The League has known for a long time that land use planning sets the stage for everything good and bad that happens in an area. And so they were very active prior to the adoption of the current plan. They participated in it all the way, providing letters and comments, and even proposing a brand new program for the County Institute to monitor how well it does. So they have been highly interested for years. And so I, as a retired school teacher, have an interest in language, especially how plans are written. And so for the last 10 years or so, I've been looking at the county's general plan to see where it works well and where it doesn't work well. And so I'm sort of a researcher on behalf of the league.
Well, I'm not a researcher, but I did find out a few things about the cities and the towns that are implicated in what Radley's going to be talking about in a moment. Fresno County includes many cities and certain towns. I'll just name the ones off the top. Obviously, Fresno and Clovis, all the way out to Aubrey and Toll House. Shaver Lake's included, of course. Squaw Valley, Sangre del Rey, Parlier, Malaga, Fowler, Easton, Pinedale, Kerman, Tranquility, San Joaquin, Raisin City, 5 Points, Coalinga over to the west, Huron, Riverdale, Layton, Kingsburg, Selma, Parlier, Reedley. It's a very wide swath of land, and I'm wondering how you're looking at, or how the league looks at, how these towns and unincorporated places have been understood in this general plan. Is it a good general plan?
Okay, that's the question. But first I'd like to comment about your cities. You've named some incorporated cities. Each one of those has its own general plan. But you also named some unincorporated cities, and each one of those has a plan developed by the County of Fresno, even though they're not a city. And you also mentioned some of which there are no plans at all. There are about 50 communities in the county which do not have any plans whatsoever.
So what happens there, Radley? How does it develop, or what doesn't happen, or what does happen?
It's mostly what doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's why they pretty much stay the way they are. They're often called disadvantaged communities because they've been overlooked for years and years, and one of the reasons is because there's no planning for them. It's expensive, and they're not a priority in the county's list of things to do.
Well, in this general plan, you've been at it, I know, for a good period of time. Tell us what you've been investigating, you and the league together, and also other interested parties. What are you finding out about the current plan, and then lead us into what is this new plan, 2020-2040?
Okay. Regarding the current plan, it was adopted in 2000, and it had components in it called elements. It's just a technical term for a division within the policy document, such as housing or safety or whatever it is. And the flagship element for the current general plan is an economic development element. It's unusual. Fresno County has this, but other counties don't. So let me explain this a little bit. Besides having the necessary components, such as housing and so on, every county is allowed to include what other components it thinks is important. So for example, Madera County has a dairy element. You can imagine why.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Kings County has an air quality element. We don't have in Fresno County a dairy element or an air quality element. We may have small things in the general plan about that, but we don't devote an entire section to it. But we have something the other two counties don't have, and that's an economic development element.
Wow.
And that was done because we're known for our poverty here. And so, prior to 2000, the best minds got together and said, this time when we update the general plan from 2000 to 2020, let's include an economic development element and see if we can raise the people out of poverty in Fresno County.
So they've had 18 years of hopefully making everything good. How are we doing?
Okay, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Okay. The general plan began to collapse soon after it was put together. And it's not because I think people didn't want it to work. It's just that there wasn't much investment in it.
By whom?
By the county. And also the citizens of Fresno County didn't ride the tail of the supervisors to make sure that things were being done. I think people thought that once the plan is put in place, everything's solved. But the general plan for Fresno County is actually a work document. It's a work plan. It's got 52 goals in it to be achieved. 3 of them in the area of economic development, such as improving income levels for county residents. It's got over 600 policies, which are all tasks that have to be done, and 100 and I think it is 84 programs to make sure that things get done.
Oh my.
It all
Gosh.
falls to the county planning department to make sure that happens, and the board of supervisors. I'll admit they don't have the resources to do it, but I'll also say they didn't try very hard. So let me talk about the economic development element, because that's sort of the key here. What happened was, in about 2003, about 3 years after it started, the county basically abandoned the attempt to implement that element.
How would you know that? Like, is it like in retrospect, or the league saw this?
No, actually
Collapsing.
it takes a lot of digging to find out. So for example, in 2003, the county stopped reporting out annually how they were doing on the general plan. That's a state requirement that every year you submit to the state, sort of like an overview. How well did we do? But in 2003, they stopped doing those. So those didn't pick up again until 2013. So there's a 10-year window when there's no record of what happened. And by the way, we can credit the League of Women Voters and other organizations for forcing the county to start doing those reports. So it's from those reports that we find out how well the county's done. If there's no reports, then we've got trouble. But we do have a report from 2003, 2002 actually, the very first report, and then we do have the latest reports. So we can go back and read them and see what's happened during those years. So in 2002, the county had hired someone specially to help with economic development in the county's office. It had formed an action team, and it was on its way to get things done. Then you find out when you look at the reports from 2013, 2014, that position in the county was closed. There's no action team working on anything, and so you can figure out what happened, that sometime in those 10 years, the county abandoned the attempt to actually implement it.
So what happened after 2013? The league kind of like pushes it at least to do something. You start getting annual reports.
Right.
So we've gotten 5 of those more or less.
Yeah, approximately, right.
What are they apologetic, or I mean, what I mean is, do they see the figures? They're not meeting goals. They're not getting objectives done. Policies are falling apart. What do they say about that? Like, how does the report review itself? How does it present itself?
Boy, you're asking the right questions, that's for sure. The reports look at every single program, all 184 of them, one by one, and say, this is how we're doing, or this is how we're not doing. The first report that came out in 2002, 2003 in that area was very honest, and it said, we're already having trouble. But we're doing our best. I think it reported approximately 85% success rate, something like that. The latest reports that have come out have been less direct, shall we say, in reporting what's happened. I would call it misreporting. So the league has to take a look at it and kind of interpret what they're trying to say. But we think the success rate now is more around 35%. And when you think that you really need 100%, 35% is considered total failure, as far as I'm concerned. So the reports have not been, shall we say, terribly honest about what's happening in the county. I'm not going to say they're lying. I'm just going to say they're avoiding the truth.
And that would be, so people are catching on the detail here. We're still about the plan that we're living with now, which still has 2 more years of life. And then somehow in 2020, we switch over to what would be is it a new plan? Does it pick up the pieces of the 2020 plan? Is it a brand new creation? Where does it fit in the scheme, Radley?
It's difficult to know. The county has not been terribly forthcoming about that. If I can give a little bit of history, I don't want to bore you with the details, but unless you kind of understand what happened, it's hard to understand what's happening now, right? The county was required every 5 years to do a little update of the plan. It's actually not an update, let's call it a review, to keep it current, to make sure it was in compliance with state law, and so on. So the county started doing that, as you can imagine, then in 2005, because that's 5 years after the plan was adopted in 2000. So there should have been a look at the entire general plan in 2005, 2010, and 2015. Well, that didn't take place. They started it in 2005, and they never finished it. They're still working on it.
Who is the they?
The county planning department has been slow.
A lot of people in that planning group, or what? I mean, do we elect them? Who are they?
The planning department is hired by the county administrator officer, who's hired by the board. So the Board of Supervisors controls everything, hires a CAO, county administrative officer. He then hires the staff. They don't have staff dedicated to do this job, right? Okay, so it's taken them 12 years and they've gotten very little. Okay. They're now approaching the year 2020 when they should be considering an update, not just a little 5-year, let's check it out. And so what happened is somehow in 2017, somebody at the county decided that this process we've been working on for all these years, this minor review, has got to turn into an update because we have to do one anyway. And so in 2017, as hard as this is to believe, the county's website went dark on the general plan for an entire year. They shut it down. And this last January, surprise, it opened back up again with a now new plan for the year 2020 to the year 2040. Now you can imagine what the problem is here. People have been commenting on this process for the last 10, 12 years, providing expert testimony what needs to be done. But they were not talking about the time from 2020 to 2040. They were talking about the time up to the year 2020. That means that all those comments, all that work of countless individuals to help fix the plan back in 2005, all those comments now do not apply to what they're trying to do as far as updating the general plan, a new plan. So it is new, but the county has never from the dais, ever, from the Board of Supervisors, told the public what it is actually doing. Does that confuse you?
No, it clarifies, because what we're seeing, at least those of us who have joined this network, a group of people that have already written a letter to the board. We were there just yesterday, which means the 21st of August. We were there at the board meeting and were able to make a certain comment, short, 2 minutes, but many of us stood there presenting our hope for much more community involvement, outreach to all these towns and cities, incorporated, non-incorporated. So I understand the problem. Do you want to bridge to what is now the task forward as we're looking at this 2020-2040 plan, or are we still going to stick around with the 2018? Where do you 2020? Where do you want to move?
Well, as you know, because you were kind enough to speak at the Board of Supervisors, which was great, what the people of the county would like would be an opportunity to talk about the challenges and the needs for the next 20 years. And so at that board hearing yesterday, many people lined up and spoke and said, we were not able to give any input into the new plan. And the Board of Supervisors replied, yes, you've been able to reply, to respond for the last 10 years. What's your problem? Got it? So there's a difference in understanding of where the community is and where the Board of Supervisors in the county are. They feel they provided lots of time for people to comment. We're complaining that we haven't had a chance to comment on the time period for which the new plan will apply, which will then determine what that plan should be like. Okay, so a network of groups has formed at the urging of the League of Women Voters, and they submitted a letter on August the 16th to the Board of Supervisors saying, this is the value of a general plan, these are the problems, this is how we are left out of the conversation, and gave them a roadmap to get back on track. And so what they basically asked was for the public portion of the general plan to be reopened. Well, actually, it's never been opened, but to open it so that people can begin to comment on the whole thing. And then they've also asked them to take a look at why their general plan now is not working. Because county residents are afraid that even if we get a new plan, the same problems that exist with the current one are going to be carried over into the next one, and then we will be no better off than we were.
Now I really want to give you kudos for what you did helping to craft the letter. It was very much a collaborative effort. Much editing went into it from the many, many people that have been networking because of your energy at causing the group to form. Do you want to share any part of the letter, and also maybe what would be those main 3 points, again, to make them clear for our listeners and our viewers?
I brought a copy of it, and there's one entire page which is sort of a way forward for the county, and so it's got 3 components to it. The first is that because there's a fundamental civic need for people to communicate in developing plans that serve them, that the county embrace broad-based public participation in the land use planning effort. And I'll give you a comparison. When the 2000 General Plan was first adopted, 18 years ago, the county held 35 public forums, held meetings before every city council, invited UC Davis in to do a study and interview people about what they wanted and what they needed for those 20 years. It was a very robust plan. This particular effort now going on with the county for the 2020-2040, there has been not one forum, and they don't plan to hold any at all. So that's the first thing. The second thing we want them to amend the drafts of the plans that are out for review. What happened was that in this last January, when the county submitted the plans for public review, they were in such a hurry for some reason, we haven't quite figured out why, that they didn't release final documents. They released the documents in draft mode.
Oh my.
And so when you go to, for example, the table of contents for the policy document, it's unusable because nothing works. Or if you go and look at a particular section where they've been redlining, you know how that works, where you put in red all the changes you want to make, you strike out what you want to take out, and you want to underline what you want to add in. There's a lot of the document that has both strikeouts and underlines because the county didn't clean it up. So we want them to go through first and clean up the document to make it readable for everyone. There's also a zoning ordinance that's also being updated, but it's not redlined. And when I say not redlined, that means that there is no way for the public to know what's being changed in the zoning ordinance. It's not like they're taking the old one and making changes to it. They've written a completely brand new zoning ordinance. So when I'm looking at it and it says this particular designation for land use should occur here, there is no way for me to check to see if that's being changed. So what we want is a redline document so that the public knows what's being changed and not being changed. And the last thing in that, also a new document called the background report. They've written a new background report, and there's been reports coming in from agencies all over the place that they use such poor data that it's not a good report. Oh, by the way, a background report, in case you don't know what that is, it's a snapshot of the conditions in the county in a given year. So for 2020, for 2000, there was a background report that showed what was the county like at that time. What was its population, its demographics, its poverty level, how much acreage in grapes. I mean, it was a complete report. It was 800 pages long.
Wow.
They've redone that from the ground up. So it's a brand new one, but they didn't do a very good job. There's so much data in it that's old already that it's not really useful. So we need to have the policy document redone so the redlining works. We need to have a redline document for the zoning ordinance so we know what the changes are, and we need to have the background report fixed so that it's actually more current. So that's the second thing that needs to be done. And then lastly, we're asking the county to look at the resources it needs to be able to make sure that a general plan can actually be implemented, because what's the point? If you're going to have all these plans and all this work to improve our lives and then not be able to implement it because you don't have the money, then why even start? We've asked the county to do all these things, and so far they have not responded with a yes.
In a nutshell, can you sum up what happened on the 21st, yesterday, for those of us recording the program, August 21st at the Board of Supervisors? What's your takeaway from where we go forward, Radley? Where do we engage the community to perhaps salvage this and make the 2020-2040 actually the document, the plan it could ever be?
I understand your question. Let me first tell you, if I can, why they held the hearing yesterday. Several organizations did comment so far on what's been happening. There was something called a notice of preparation that went out for an EIR, and based on that notice, there was an opportunity to comment, not on the plans themselves, but on the environmental study that needs to be done. It turns out that a lot of organizations that responded didn't respond to the environmental problems, because that comes later. That analysis is after you know what the plan is, right? They responded saying the plan is a lousy plan and we're not part of the planning. So the comments came back so negative to the county that the Board of Supervisors called a hearing that was held yesterday to review those comments to give staff direction. There were 2 letters that the board wanted to talk about, or planning staff wanted to talk about. One was a request by the Building Industry Association of Fresno and Madera counties to add new lands for residential development, several thousand acres. And the other was a request by the Malaga County Water District saying, please do not put any more heavy industry in our area. It is killing our residents. So the county board talked about those 2 items yesterday and decided they would not add new lands, and they would also really not listen to what the Malaga County Water District had to say. That's not what people came to talk about. People lined up to talk about not being included in the decision making here on what should be in the plan and all of its faults and so on. But the board yesterday wouldn't even address the subject at all. So we went with a purpose. We think we gave them a message anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And they got the message. And so now what to do in the future? I feel it's going to be necessary for the community to come together and compel the Board of Supervisors, however that needs to be done, to realize that the general plan is the lifeblood of this county. It decides everything about our future. And if we're going to have a successful plan from 2020 to 2040, you have to involve the public in its design. It just has to be done.
On that note, I'm going to say, Radley, thank you so much. If you are interested in becoming part of the solution, actually becoming an active citizen over the issue of the general plan for the Fresno County 2020-2040, please be in touch with us. You can go to the website where this program is being archived as a YouTube video, and we'll also be able to connect with you over the other ways that this podcast can be heard. We're looking for comments. We will make those documents that Radley mentioned available, and we look forward to the next time that Looking at Social Justice will be your favorite new podcast.